Rhea's knees scraped against the jagged metal grates as she wormed deeper into the geothermal conduits, the air thick with the acrid tang of overheating conduits and sulfurous steam. Her toolkit clanged softly against her hip, the only sound besides her ragged breaths echoing in the narrow crawl space. The cliff city above was starving for power, its shields flickering under the relentless assault from Sarek's sky fleets, and down here, in the bowels of the mountain, it was her job to keep the ancient pumps coughing along. Sweat stung her eyes, mixing with the grime on her face, but she pushed on, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom like a knife. The conduits narrowed, forcing her to slither on her belly, the walls pressing in like the jaws of some buried beast. A low hum vibrated through the rock, the heartbeat of the city's lifeblood, but it was faltering, sputters and groans that spoke of fractures she couldn't ignore. Her gloved fingers traced a hairline crack in the pipe overhead, coolant hissing faintly. "Come on," she muttered, twisting to patch it with a strip of sealant. But as she shifted, her light caught something impossible. Not machinery, but bone. Vast, curved bone fused into the very framework of the conduits like roots of a petrified tree. She froze, heart slamming against her ribs. The skull loomed in the chamber ahead, a cavernous expanse where the crawlspace opened up. It was draconic. Scales flaked away to reveal cracked ivory, horns spiraling like rusted spires, and jaws wide enough to swallow a dropship whole. Chains of blackened alloy snaked from its cranium, threading into the geothermal arrays, pulsing with faint, sickly energy. The thing was desiccated, a relic from the old wars, but its eye socket, empty, cavernous, stared back at her through the haze. Rhea's mouth went dry. Dragons were myths, extinction's ghosts, not this, not the core of their power grid. She fumbled for her recorder, thumbing it on. Log entry, Sector 7, conduit breach, visual anomaly, possible structural integration with organic remains. Need backup for... A jolt ripped through the chamber. Sparks erupted from the chains, blue arcs dancing along the links as an automated restraint system engaged with a whine like tearing metal. Rhea yelped, dropping flat as the floor bucked beneath her. The air crackled, ozone sharp in her nose, and then movement. In the depths of that skull, a membrane fluttered, a faint golden eye cracked open, slit pupil dilating in the glare of her light. The rasp came like grinding stones, echoing from the bones themselves. Water, after the endless dry... "Give it to me, little one." Rhea scrambled back, slamming into the conduit wall, her toolkit spilling open. The voice wasn't in her ears. It vibrated in her chest, ancient and parched, laced with a pain that clawed at her gut. She stared, breath hitching, as the eye fixed on her, unblinking, majestic even in ruin. Terrifying. The chains hummed, restraints tightening with mechanical fury, but the dragon, gods it was alive, didn't flinch. Just watched, pleading in that cracked whisper. Footsteps clattered from the access tunnel behind her. "Rhea? What in the hells was that shake?" Mara's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the haze. The engineer squeezed into view. Her face smeared with oil, toolkit mirroring Rhea's. She took one look at the scene and paled, lunging forward to snatch the recorder from Rhea's belt. "Off, now." "Mara, what?" Mara killed the device with a twist, pocketing it. Her eyes darted to the skull, then back to Rhea, hard lines etching deeper around her mouth. "You didn't see that. None of it. We're calling this a conduit overload, nothing more." Rhea pushed to her feet, legs unsteady. "That's a dragon, a real one, bound into the reactor like some battery." Mara's jaw tightened, her hand lingering on the recorder as if weighing secrets. She was Rhea's mentor, the one who'd taught her to coax life from dying machines. But now her eyes held something fractured. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "It's Vitharion, last of the war dragons. We didn't build this city on geothermal alone. His life force powers the shields, the forges, everything keeping Sarek's fleets at bay. 8 centuries shackled here, after his kind scorched half the world. The old councils bound him to atone, to serve. But he's fading, Rhea. If he dies, so do we." The words landed like blows. Rhea glanced at the skull, the eye still watching, patient and immense. A godlike creature reduced to this husk, its power siphoned to shield a city of desperate humans. Her stomach twisted. Survival at any cost. That's what she believed after watching her brother bleed out in the last siege. But this, weaponizing suffering? Before she could speak, the mountain shuddered. Explosions rocked the cavern above, dust sifting from the ceiling like ash. Sarek's bombardment again, sky fleets unleashing hell on the cliffside defenses. The chains rattled, Vitharian's eye narrowing as the quake rippled through him. Mara grabbed Rhea's arm, pulling her toward the exit. Forget the skull. Patch the conduits, reroute the flow. We can't lose pressure now, not with those bastards raining fire. The city's hanging by threads. Your threads. Do your job. Rhea nodded numbly, but as Mara vanished up the tunnel, she lingered. The eye tracked her, that rasping plea echoing in her mind. Water. Simple, human mercy. The city rationed every drop but down here in the coolant lines. She glanced at the pipes overhead, hissing faintly. Her hands moved before her brain caught up. Toolkit open, wrench turning. A small valve, just enough. A drip line rerouted, siphoning from the main flow. Precious water stolen for a monster. It pattered into the cracked maw below the skull. Tiny droplets vanishing into the desiccated throat. Vitharian's eye flared brighter, a low rumble vibrating the air, not pain but relief. Ah, the gift of the small ones, you see me? Rhea's pulse thundered. Forbidden, yes, but the connection sparked something raw in her, a fragile thread between mechanic and beast, human will and draconic fire. She sealed the line, hiding the hack, and crawled out, the weight of it settling like lead in her chest. Hours later she emerged into the Undercity's forge-lit warrens, the air cooler but no less heavy with the scent of smoke and fear. Alarms wailed faintly from above, the bombardment easing but the damage done. Kale was waiting near the lift shaft, his captain's insignia dulled by dust, face etched with the war's endless grind. Former lover, still something, tangled and unspoken. He pulled her into a shadowed alcove, voice low. Rhea, the batteries are starving. Anti-air's down to days, maybe less. Sarek's probing the shields harder each wave. His hand brushed her shoulder, a ghost of old warmth, but his eyes were steel. Whatever's powering the core down there, we need more. Push it. Bleed it dry if you have to. She swallowed, the drip of water echoing in her memory. Kale's ruthlessness had saved them before, sacrificing outposts, rationing lives, but it chipped at him, at them. It's not just a machine, Kale, it's alive, sentient. He cut her off, grip tightening. Doesn't matter, we're the last holdout, Rhea. Humanity's cliff edge. If it buys us time, we use it. His gaze softened fractionally, searching her face. Don't make me order it. She pulled away, nodding, the lie bitter on her tongue. Up the lift, through the trembling streets, but her mind stayed below. Back in the conduits that night, alone again, the change hit like a surge. Vitharian's scales gleamed faintly, hydrated cracks sealing with a subtle creak. The stolen water had stirred him, strength flickering through his frame. His eye met hers, brighter now, and with a flex of ancient muscle, he tested the chains. Just a twitch, but it sent tremors through the mountain, rock groaning, alarms blaring anew from the city above. Rhea braced against the wall, heart in her throat. The dragon's power, awakening. Majestic, yes, but the quake would draw eyes. Mar-A's, Kale's, the councils, and worse, the order came crackling over her calm. Increase draw from the reactor. Maximize output. She stared at Vitharian, his maw parted slightly. Breath, a warm gust carrying the scent of embers, revived him just enough to feel the torment anew. Pushing harder would kill him, finish what centuries of thirst started, but the fleets circled, bombs falling, her city dying. Survival's cost, clawing deeper, her hands trembled on the controls, the metal warm under her palms like fevered skin. Vitharian's eyes, those cracked amber slits, held hers for a beat too long, a silent accusation in their glow. She pulled back, sealing the feed valves with a hiss of steam. The cavern's geothermal hum settled into a low throb, echoing her pulse. Up the ladder, through the access tunnels, the weight of the mountain pressed in, but it was nothing compared to the knot in her gut. Mara waited in the engineering bay, her face gaunt under the flickering overheads. The older woman paced the narrow walkway, tools clinking in her belt like forgotten regrets. When Rhea emerged, sweat-slicked and hollow-eyed, Mara stopped short. "You went back down there alone, after what happened last time." Rhea wiped her brow, avoiding the question. "The pumps are holding, barely, but he's aware now, more than before." Mara's shoulders sagged and she gestured Rhea toward a shadowed alcove, away from the humming consoles and the distant shouts of techs rerouting power. The air smelled of ozone and stale rations. "Sit. We need to talk, and not about maintenance logs." Her voice cracked, the first real fracture Rhea had seen in her mentor's armor. They hunkered on crates amid tangled cables, the city's underbelly groaning around them. Mara rubbed her temples, eyes distant. "I should have told you sooner. The founders, they didn't build this place on hot springs. It was him, Vytharian. They bound him 800 years ago after the Dragon Legions fell, chained his fire to the lattice, turned his heart into our power grid, weaponizing it to carve these cliffs, to keep the old wars from swallowing us whole." Rhea's breath caught, the pieces slamming together, the unnatural heat, the whispers in the vents, the way the mountain seemed to breathe. "Bound? Like a slave? And you knew?" Mara nodded, guilt etching deeper lines into her face. "I was part of the program that maintained it, swore an oath never to let him wake fully. He's a god of war, Rhea. Majestic once, they say, wings blotting the sun, breath that melted armies. But now, a husk. If he stirs too much, it'll unravel everything. The city, us, him." She leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "We keep him dreaming, or we all burn." Rhea stared at the floor, the confession twisting like a wrench in her ribs. Her brother had died in the last siege, crushed under rubble when the power flickered. She'd fixed machines to keep the lights on, the guns firing, but this was no machine. It was a creature suffering in silence. "And if the fleets break through, we just let him rot while they slaughter us?" Mara's eyes hardened, but the fear lingered. "Survival's a thief, girl. It takes pieces you can't get back." The alarm klaxons wailed before Rhea could respond, red lights pulsing through the bay. Mara surged to her feet, barking orders as techs scrambled. Rhea followed, the confession burning in her chest like bad fuel. Up in the command spire, the air was thicker with tension, smoke from incense burners mingling with the tang of unwashed bodies. Kale stood at the tactical holomap, his uniform rumpled, jaw set like forged steel. The projection flickered, coalition skiffs circling the cliffs. Their bomb runs carving scars into the outer defenses. Flak towers, experimental rigs, Rhea's core had jury-rigged from scrap, sputtered along the rim, barely scratching the invaders' hulls. "Overclock them," Kale snapped, his voice cutting through the murmurs of aides. He slammed a fist on the console, the map jittering. "Engineering, I need those towers at 120%, or we lose the East Ridge by dawn." Mara, patched in via comms from the bay, hesitated on the line. Rhea stood at her side, close enough to feel the older woman's tremor. "Captain, that's suicide. The grid's already strained. Push harder, and we risk cascade failures, blackouts, structural breaches." Kale's gaze flicked to the feed, locking on Rhea's face for a split second, a ghost of their old warmth buried under exhaustion. "Then loosen the restraints on the core, whatever it takes. Sarek's blockade is tightening. Drones aren't getting through. We fight or starve." The line went dead. Mara cursed under her breath, her hands clenching. "He doesn't know about the dragon, but if I ease those bindings..." She trailed off, eyes haunted. Rhea saw it then, the fracture in Mara's resolve, the temptation to trade one torment for another. Night fell like a shroud, the city's lights dimming to conserve power. Rhea couldn't shake the cavern's pull, Vytharian's gaze haunting her steps, through the ration lines and patrol shifts. By midnight, she slipped away. Toolkit slung over her shoulder, descending the service shafts alone. The air grew hotter, thicker, the walls slick with condensation. Her boots echoed on the grated floors, each step a betrayal of Mara's warning. The cavern opened before her, vast and shadowed. Vitharian's form sprawled like a fallen monument. Chains of alloy and rune-etched stone snaked from his scales to the pulsing conduits, his chest rising in shallow, labored breaths. She approached the basin, filling it from her canteen. Precious water siphoned from her own ration. It trickled over his cracked lips, and his eye cracked open, a low rumble vibrating the stone. "You return, little mechanic," his voice echoed in her mind, gravel and thunder laced with dry amusement. "With gifts or demands?" Rhea knelt, keeping her distance from the heat radiating off him. "Water for truth. How do your power channels work? The lattice. Tell me, or I walk." He shifted slightly, chains groaning, a puff of ash escaping his nostrils. Fascination gleamed in that amber gaze, terrifying in its depth, like staring into a storm. Bold, humans always bargain with what they fear. A pause, his breath warming the air. "The binding lattice weaves through my veins, siphons my fire into your machines. It damps my will, turns essence to heat. But with controlled release, loosen a node, guide the flow. I could project flame outward, limited bursts enough to sear a fleet from the sky, without toppling your fragile mountain." Rhea's heart hammered, visions flashing, dragonfire lancing the dark, skiffs plummeting in flames. Salvation, but his voice carried a rasp, his scales flaking like old paint. Sanity fraying after centuries of thirst, of being milked like a beast. Report this to Kale and they'd carve him open for more. Shield him and the city fell. She backed away, mind churning. The dilemma clawed at her, pragmatism screaming for the weapon, her brother's ghost whispering of lines not crossed. Vitharian watched, silent, his presence a majestic weight, awe-inspiring even in ruin. Dawn brought chaos to the surface. Sarek's blockade had choked the last supply drones. Twisted wreckage littered the cliffs, fuel pods bursting on impact. Word spread like fire through the lower districts, rations halved, water trucks dry. By midday, riots erupted in the market warrens, desperate families clashing with guards over scraps. Rhea pushed through the throng near the east gate, the air thick with shouts and the coppery scent of blood. A woman lunged at a ration cart, only for Kale's troops to shove her back with rifle butts. He stood atop a barricade, face carved from stone, directing the line. "Hold them! No one breaches the depots!" She climbed the scaffold, grabbing his arm. "Kale, this is madness. They're starving, not enemy." His eyes met hers, weary but unyielding, the man she'd once known buried under command's weight. "And if they overrun the stores, we all starve faster. Sarek's playing the long game, break us from within." A rioter charged, and Kale raised his sidearm, hesitating a fraction before firing a warning shot into the dirt. The crowd surged, screams rising. "Lethal force if they push, that's the order." Rhea recoiled, the brutality hitting like a gut punch, her city tearing itself apart. Vitharian's power could end it, but at what price? She pulled Kale aside, voice low amid the din. "The reactor, it's not just a core, it's alive, a dragon, bound down there." His face paled, then hardened. "What?" "But it's unstable. Waking it fully, it'd kill us all. Destroy the mountain from inside." Lies woven with half-truths, her words planting seeds of doubt. Kale's trust fractured, suspicion flickering toward her, toward Mara, toward the shadows below. He gripped her shoulder too tight. "You hide this now, after everything?" But the riots pulled him back, orders barked into the storm. Rhea slipped away, heart pounding, the partial truth a poison spreading. Distrust on all sides. Kale's. Rhea's boots echoed off the cavern walls as she descended the narrow service shaft, the air growing thicker with the metallic tang of overheating conduits. Her heart still hammered from the confrontation above, Kale's eyes narrowing as she fed him just enough of the truth to keep him at bay, but not enough to shatter the fragile command structure. Distrust coiled in his gaze like smoke, and she felt it mirroring in her own chest. The partial confession about the reactor anomaly had bought time, but lies had a way of eroding foundations, just like the siege was eroding the city. Alarms blared suddenly, a shrill cascade that vibrated through the rock. Rhea froze, gripping the ladder rungs. Seismic sensors? No, worse. The ground shuddered, a deep rumble that sent dust sifting from the ceiling. Tunneling charges. Sarek's fleet had been probing the cliffs for weeks, but this felt targeted, precise. She scrambled the last few meters down, bursting into the reactor chamber where Mara already hunched over a flickering console, her face illuminated by the red glow of emergency lights. "They're breaching the outer caverns," Mara said without looking up, her voice tight as she punched in override codes. "Precision barrage, aimed right at the geothermal array. If they hit the core, we lose everything," Rhea finished, sliding into the adjacent station. The schematics bloomed on her screen. Coalition borers chewing through the mountain like maggots in flesh, vectors converging on Vitharian's prison. The dragon's bindings hummed faintly in the distance, a low throb that had become background noise until now. "We can't hold them with the pumps alone. The anti-air batteries are drained." Mara's fingers paused, her knuckles white. She was a woman who'd buried secrets deeper than these tunnels, but the lines around her eyes betrayed the weight. Protective of Rhea, yes, but complicit in the chains that bound a god below. "We unshackle a segment, just one. Channel his fire through the exchangers. It's risky. Centuries of dormancy, and he's unstable." Rhea swallowed, glancing toward the sealed vault door where Vitharian lay. The decision clawed at her. Survival for the city, or another chain on a creature already broken. Her brother's face flashed in her mind. Lost to a similar siege, his screams cut short by skyfire. No more losses. Not if she could stop it. "Do it! I'll sink the restraints," the comms crackled before Mara could respond. Kale's voice cut through, clipped and urgent. "Solace Eisen, report. Tunneling signatures confirm coalition assault on sublevels. I'm authorizing override Delta 7. Rhea's stomach twisted. Override meant command bypass, straight from the captain's chair. She patched in, the chamber's speakers buzzing. "Captain, it's a direct hit on the reactors. We need to—" "Loosen the primary restraint," Kale interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Manuals sync with the flak towers. Turn that power into a curtain. I've signed the order. It's on you, Rhea. Make it count." The words landed like a blow. Responsible. Her hands trembled as she pulled up the binding protocols, ancient runes interfaced with human tech, glowing faintly on the holographic display. Kale's signature scrolled across it, digital ink sealing her fate. He trusted her skill, but not her hesitation. Their old bond frayed further. He saw victory in the flames while she saw the cost. Mara nodded grimly, initiating the sequence. "Vault access granted. Go. I'll route the exchangers." Rhea grabbed her toolkit and sprinted to the vault, the shuddering earth urging her on. The massive door hissed open on hydraulics, revealing the desiccated form of Vitharian. He sprawled across the cavern floor, scales cracked like parched earth, bones protruding through withered flesh. 800 years as a battery, siphoning his essence to heat the city, to pump water from the depths. His eyes, molten gold slits, cracked open as she approached, a low rasp escaping his maw. "Little scavenger," he murmured, voice like grinding stone. "You return. What desperation brings you now?" "Tunnelers," Rhea said, kneeling at the first binding segment, a colossal cuff of alloy and rune-etched stone clamped around his forelimb. "They're coming for you, for us. I need a surge, just one." His laugh was a dry wheeze, but his gaze sharpened, fascination flickering amid the pain. He despised them, humans with their clever cruelties, but their will intrigued him, a spark against the void of his extinction. "Free it, then, but know the thirst." She worked fast, tools dancing over the locks, circuits sparked, runes pulsed, and the cuff groaned open with a seismic crack. Vitharian's limb twitched, scales rippling as blood, thick, ancient, flowed anew. Rhea yanked the emergency valve, unleashing a torrent of coolant water from the geothermal lines. It rushed over him in a silver cascade, steaming on contact with his fevered hide. He drank it in, jaws parting, the liquid vanishing into his parched form like rain on desert stone. "Direct it," he growled, chest heaving. "The exchangers, above." Rhea climbed the access gantry, linking the dragon's maw to the city's heat grid via flexible conduits. His breath built, a gathering storm in his throat, channeled through the pipes like liquid fury. She synced the flow to the anti-air batteries, her console beeping alignment. "Now," she whispered, hitting the release. The cavern ignited. Vytharian's roar echoed as dragonfire erupted, not wild but funneled, a blazing river surging upward through the exchangers. It hit the flak towers with a thunderous bloom, transforming the batteries into vents of hellish light. Outside, across the besieged cliffs of the city, a sheet of incandescent fury arced into the sky, a flak curtain of pure dragonfire, majestic and merciless. From the command deck high above, Kale watched the feeds, fists clenched on the console. Dropships plummeted, their hulls shearing apart in mid-descent, flames trailing like dying stars. Sarek's first wave, dozens of sleek coalition craft, shredded under the onslaught, wreckage raining onto the lower slopes. But the fire didn't stop at the enemy. It licked the upper terraces, melting stone and steel, screams rising from the civilian habs as structures buckled. In the chamber below, the surge backlashed. Power arcs leaped from the conduits, electrocuting engineers mid-task. Bodies convulsed and fell, including Elias, Mara's partner of 2 decades, a quiet man who'd shared her burdens without question. He slumped against a panel, charred and still, the acrid smell of burned flesh filling the air. Mara burst in moments later, eyes locking on Elias. Her face crumpled, then hardened into rage. She rounded on Rhea, voice echoing off the walls for all to hear over the comms. "You hesitated, too slow on the sync, too bold on the release. If you'd calibrated properly, it saved the caverns," Rhea shot back, wiping sweat from her brow, the weight of death's pressing on her chest. Guilt twisted like a knife. Elias had been kind to her, a steady hand in the chaos, but the tunnelers were stopped, the breach sealed. Wasn't that the point? Survival justified almost anything. Yet Mara's blame stung, a mentor's betrayal born of grief. Vytharian writhed, the forced fire ripping through his dormant veins like shattered glass. He thrashed against the remaining bindings, scales flaking away, his massive form coiling in agony. "Fools!" he snarled, golden eyes blazing at Rhea. "You repeat the cycle. We were generals, scorched the world in glory and wrath. Betrayed, bound, reduced to your weapons. This pain, your surge, it awakens nothing but the old hunger. Humanity's brutality mirrored in ours. When will you learn?" Rhea stepped back, his words a lash. She saw it then, the moral fracture. She'd freed a sliver of him, but at what cost to his soul? Her own hands felt stained, the pragmatic shell cracking under the horror. Far above, in the belly of his flagship, Commander Sarek Vale gripped the viewport sill, the sky alight with the inferno. His dropships burned, crews vaporized in an instant. The scale of it shook him. Dragonfire after all these centuries. He'd come to starve them into submission, to claim their hidden power for the Coalition's unity. But this? Humans unleashing a god's wrath. Collateral be damned. No restraint, no apocalypse-proofing. If they stabilized it, the old wars would return, continents aflame again. "Reorient," he barked to his officers, voice steady despite the tremor in his gut. "Full assault, annihilation protocols, glass the cliffs before they harness it fully." Back in the reactor chamber, the alarms shifted. New signatures on the scopes, a larger wave inbound. Kale's voice crackled over the comms, elated despite the terrace fires still smoldering on external feeds. "That was just the vanguard. We've bought time, Rhea, real time." Rhea wiped sweat from her brow, the acrid tang of overheated circuits clinging to her skin like a second layer of grime. The chamber hummed with residual energy, Vytharian's vast form a shadowed mountain in the dim glow of the binding arrays. She didn't respond to Kale, not yet. Her hands still trembled from syncing the dragon's pulse to the outer turrets. the way his ancient heart had thrummed through her gloves like a war drum. It had worked, barely. The sky fleets had scattered, their gunships trailing smoke as they retreated into the storm clouds. But the cost. By the time she surfaced from the underbelly tunnels, the city was alive with ragged cheers. Cliffside lanterns flickered against the sheer rock faces, casting long shadows over the narrow walkways. People clustered in the central plaza, their faces gaunt but lit with desperate hope. Banners of frayed cloth whipped in the wind, proclaiming humanity endures. Rhea pushed through the throng, her mechanic's jumpsuit stiff with oil and ash. Kale was already there, atop a makeshift platform of stacked crates, his guard uniform torn at the shoulder where a stray bolt had grazed him. He raised a fist, and the crowd roared, but not everyone. As Rhea reached the platform's edge, a woman broke from the edges, a wiry figure in mourning gray, her eyes hollowed by grief. She clutched a charred bundle to her chest, the remnants of a child's coat. "You call this victory?" she shouted, voice slicing through the din like a blade. Heads turned, murmurs rippling outward. "My son, incinerated by your dragonfire, stray blasts from those cursed turrets." Kale's jaw tightened, but he kept his stance firm. "We repelled them. Lives were saved." "Saved," another voice joined, a man with bandaged arms, his family clustering behind him like wounded birds. "My wife burned on the terrace while you played with monsters below." "What experiments are you running down there? We hear the rumors, ancient evils siphoning our water, our power." The cheers faltered, fracturing into shouts. Rhea felt the weight of eyes on her, the mechanic who jury-rigged the arrays. She stepped forward, heart pounding. "It wasn't meant to—" "Shut it," the woman snarled, shoving past a guard. "You and your captain gambling with our blood for your toys." The crowd surged, a tide of anger crashing against the platform. Kale signaled his men, but the fracture was there, support crumbling like the eroded cliffs. Rhea backed away, the celebration souring into whispers of doubt. How many more would they lose before the city turned on them? Deep in the geothermal array, hours later, the air grew thicker, laced with the metallic bite of ozone. Mara Eisen moved like a ghost among the conduits, her toolkit whispering against the stone floor. The chamber's core lights cast harsh shadows on Vitharian's desiccated scales, the dragon's massive ribs rising and falling in shallow rhythm. He slept, or seemed to, his eyes slitted shut, but Rhea knew better. Those golden slits missed nothing. Mara knelt by a secondary restraint node, her fingers deftly threading fresh binding cables into the lattice. She hummed a tuneless calibration check, masking the clicks of reconnection. Each restraint was a web of enchanted steel and geothermal wards, designed to leach Vitharian's essence without fully waking him. But after the surge, when Rhea had tapped his heartfire directly, cracks had spiderwebbed through the system. Mara worked faster, sweat beading on her lined face. If he fully stirred, if that ancient rage uncoiled, the city would be ash from within. She'd bound him centuries ago, under orders she couldn't refuse, but the guilt gnawed deeper now. Protective of Rhea, yes, but terrified of the girl, unraveling the very chains that kept them all alive. Rhea found Kale in the command bunker, hunched over holographic maps that flickered with incoming fleet projections. The room smelled of stale rations and burnt wiring, the walls scarred from past blasts. She slammed the door behind her, the plaza confrontation still burning in her chest. "What the hell was that plan of yours? Tying the entire defensive grid to his heartbeat? One stutter from Vitharian, and the whole city blacks out, turrets, shields, life support. Instant collapse." Kale didn't look up at first, his fingers tracing fleet vectors. Scars from old sieges pulled tight across his knuckles. "It's not a plan, Rhea. It's survival. The coalition's regrouping. Sarek won't stop until we're starved or shattered. Vitharian's power is our edge. Sink the grid, and we hit them with precision fire, not wild sprays." She leaned over the table, voice low and fierce. "Precision? That wild spray killed civilians today. His heart isn't a battery. It's alive, Kale. Unstable. You felt it during the link. I saw your face. One failure, and we're not just dark. We're dead. He met her eyes then, the old fire there, mixed with something harder, colder. The man who'd once pulled her from a collapsing trench, now weighing lives like ammunition counts. I know the risks, but doing nothing, that's collapse too. We've lost too much already, your brother, my squad. This city is all that's left. His hand brushed hers, a ghost of their past, but she pulled away. The argument hung between them, unresolved, as alarms pinged a new alert. By midnight, the order went out. Quiet through back channels Kel controlled. Reroute the hospital's emergency water reserves to the Dragon Chamber. Vytharian's thirst was worsening. Without hydration, his fire would gutter out, leaving them defenseless. The medics discovered it at dawn, when pumps ran dry mid-shift. Fury erupted in the lower wards, doctors storming the guard posts, patients wheezing in parched beds. "You're killing the sick to feed your beast?" one shouted over the comms, voice raw. Kale's response was curt. "Priorities, firepower saves more lives than bandages." But the backlash spread like fever, medics refusing rotations, whispers of mutiny threading through the ranks. Rhea heard it all from the tunnels, her stomach twisting. Kale's ruthlessness was a blade, cutting deeper into the city's fraying soul. She descended to Vytharian's chamber alone that evening, the restraints humming faintly under Mara's calibrations. The dragon's head lifted slightly as she approached, his voice a rumble like grinding stone, echoing in her mind more than her ears. "Little mechanic, your kind clings to me like vines to a dying tree. I feel it, their dependence, a noose tightening." Rhea stopped short of his maw, the heat from his scales warming the chill air. Water dripped from jury-rigged hoses, pooling in cracks where his claws scraped the stone. "We need you. The fleets are coming back stronger." "Need," he echoed, a dry hiss of amusement and pain. "A bargain, then." "I will lend my fire, not wild but focused strikes carving their hulls like parchment, but swear it, human, after you free me. No more chains, no more torment." His eyes gleamed, majestic even in ruin, scales cracked like ancient armor, wings folded tight against bones that could shatter mountains. Awe warred with terror in her chest. This was no machine, but a god of old wars, betrayed and bound. She opened her mouth, but the words caught. Down in the dim light, away from the clamor, Rhea sank to her knees beside him. Tears burned tracks through the grime on her face. I can't swear that. Freeing you means cutting the arrays, dooming the pumps, the power. The city falls without you." Her voice broke, the admission a knife to her gut. Pragmatism had always been her shield. Survival justified the rest. But here, staring into those fathomless eyes, she saw it. She was choosing his cage. Her hands, once steady on tools, shook as she touched a restraint cable. Moral collapse hit like a siege wave, leaving her hollow. Brother's face flashed in her mind, lost to the same desperate gambles. What was she becoming? Across the besieged cliffs, Sarek Vale's sky fleet loomed in the thunderheads, his command ship a sleek dagger amid the clouds. He watched the feeds from his bridge, the city's fragile lights winking below. Psychological warfare was his specialty. Break the will before the walls. "Broadcast this," he ordered, voice smooth as oiled steel. His officers complied, and the message boomed from hidden relays, infiltrating the city's comms like smoke. "Citizens of the Cliffhold," Sarek's image flickered on public screens, stern face framed by imperial insignia. "The Coalition offers amnesty to any engineer or technician who sabotages Rhea's boots, scraped against the grated floor of the lower reactor decks, the air thick with the metallic tang of overheating conduits." The public screens in the maintenance bays had just gone dark after Sarek's broadcast, his voice still echoing in her skull like a bad omen. Amnesty for saboteurs, as if any of them would bite, not with the city's veins running dry on rations and the sky fleets circling like vultures. She wiped sweat from her brow, focusing on the console before her. Routine diagnostics, that's what she'd told herself, but the logs wouldn't lie. Her fingers danced over the interface, pulling up access histories. Anomalies flickered up, unauthorized uplinks, time-stamped in the dead of night, routing data straight to external nodes, coalition frequencies. Her stomach twisted, not some glitch from the strain of Vitharian's bindings. This was deliberate betrayal. She stormed up the access ladder to Mara's overlook, the older woman's silhouette hunched over a schematic hollow projection. Mara didn't look up at first, her hands steady as she adjusted a calibration slider. "Rhea, you're early for the shift handoff." "Save it." Rhea slammed the datapad onto the console, the uplink logs glowing accusingly. "These came from your terminal. Designs for the geothermal array. Our array. You fed them to the enemy?" Mara's shoulders sagged, but her eyes met Rhea's without flinching. She killed the hollow with a swipe, the chamber dimming to the red emergency glow. Partial schematics only. Enough to make them think twice about a full assault. "Think twice? You're handing them our defenses on a platter." Rhea's voice cracked, the words tasting like ash. Mara had been her anchor since the sieges started, the one who taught her to coax life from dying machines. But this was treason wrapped in good intentions. Mara stepped closer, her voice low and urgent. "Listen to me. The Coalition's probing for the Dragon's signature. If they hit us blind, Vitharian's first real strike will backlash through the bindings, fry the whole undergrid, take half the city with it. I gave them just enough to calibrate their shields, buy us time to stabilize. It saves lives, Rhea. Our lives." Rhea's fists clenched, nails biting into her palms. Survival justified almost anything, she'd told herself after losing her brother. But this felt like crossing a line into the void. Before she could press further, the comms buzzed. Kale's voice, clipped and commanding. "All section leads to central command. Now." The briefing chamber reeked of recycled air and tension, guards lining the walls with rifles slung low. Kyle stood at the head of the table, his uniform scarred from the last skirmish, eyes scanning the room like he was already picking targets. Rhea slipped in beside Mara, her mind racing. When Kale's gaze landed on them, it hardened. "Intel from perimeter drones," he said, activating a tactical overlay. Coalition signals matched the uplinks. Someone inside had leaked array configs. "It's one of you, and we've traced it." He nodded to a guard, who stepped forward with restraints. Straight for Mara. Mara's face paled. But she didn't resist as the cuffs clicked on. "Kale, this is madness. You need me." "Detain her," Kale cut in, his tone brooking no argument. The room fell silent, eyes turning to Rhea. She felt the weight of it, the fracture lines in her world pulling taut. Defend Mara, and she'd undermine Kale's authority at the worst possible time, when the fleets were massing for another run. Side with him, and she'd betray the woman who'd pulled her from the wreckage of her brother's death. Her throat tightened, the pragmatic voice in her head screaming to choose the city, choose survival. I saw the logs," Rhea said finally, her voice steady despite the churn in her gut. "She's compromised us." The words burned, but she held Kale's gaze, watching Mara's betrayal flicker into something like pity. The guards hauled Mara away, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Rhea waited until the chamber emptied before slipping into Mara's vacated office. The private terminal was still warm, unlocked in the haste. Heart pounding, she jacked in her own pad and copied everything. Encrypted files on the bindings, centuries-old protocols buried under layers of redacted code. As the transfer hummed, a schematic unfolded, a failsafe node woven into Vitharian's restraints. It could overload the anchors, either shattering them to free him or crushing his essence in the collapse. No subtlety, no control, just kill or release. She yanked the pad free and bolted for the underdecks, the weight of her choice settling like lead in her chest. Publicly loyal to Kyle, but this secret burned hotter than any reactor. The descent to Vitharian's chamber was a gauntlet of heat and shadow, steam vents hissing like warnings. Rhea sealed the access hatch behind her, the massive form of the dragon looming in the geothermal haze, a skeletal majesty of cracked obsidian scales and veins pulsing with stolen fire. His eyes, molten gold slits, fixed on her as she approached the binding console. "You reek of fracture, little mechanic," Vitharion rumbled, his voice a seismic grind that vibrated through the stone. "The Old One's chains tighten on your spirit. What have you wrought?" Rhea hesitated, the pad clutched in her hand. She shouldn't trust him, this ancient predator shackled for eons, but his gaze peeled her open anyway. "My mentor. She leaked data to the enemy. To save us from you, maybe. From what you'd do if we pushed too hard." A low chuckle echoed, like boulders shifting in a cavern. "Humans and their gifts of poison. 8 centuries past, it was much the same. My legion scorched the skies for your kind's empires until the betrayal at Carvelt." His tail twitched, chains rattling faintly. "We dragons thought ourselves the apex of ferocity, flame that melted mountains, claws that sundered fleets. But you shocked us, sacrificed your own legions into our maws, not as fodder but as living fuses, wired your soldiers with volatile cores, detonating them mid-swallow to rip us from inside. Ferocity born of desperation, it broke my kin, turned brother against brother, and in the end they bound me here, thirsting to power your fragile holds." Rhea's breath caught, the image searing into her mind. Humans as willing bombs, erasing the line between savior and monster. Was that what she was becoming? "And you? What would you do if freed?" His eyes narrowed, fascination glinting amid the rage. "Rewrite the pyre's end. But first, I would drink deep." The words hung, literal and vast, as alarms blared overhead. Bombardment inbound. High above, in the Coalition's command dirigible, Sarek Vale studied the thermal readouts with clinical precision. The captured profiles from Vitharion's initial strike painted a deadly map. Fire arcs, heat blooms, the dragon's raw signature. "Calibrate the mirrors," he ordered, his voice steady over the bridge chatter. "Full deployment on the eastern cliffs. Reflect it back. Let their own god burn them." The bombers screamed in low, their hulls sheathed in adaptive mirror shields, angled to catch and redirect. The first dragonfire lanced up from the city's depths, a searing pillar that should have vaporized the lead craft. Instead, the shields warped it mid-flight, bending the inferno into ricocheting spears that plunged back toward the cliff-hold. Explosions bloomed along the outer walls, stones shattering, screams rising as fire twisted unnaturally, igniting supply depots and crew quarters in chain reactions. Rhea felt the impacts through the undergrid, the whole chamber shuddering. Vitharion's roar built, restrained fury straining the bindings, but the ricochets were targeting the array. Her array. Alarms screamed overload in her repair bay above, coolant lines fracturing under the heat feedback. No time for evac. The grid segment would cascade if it went. She sprinted up the emergency shaft, lungs burning, and slammed into the bay. Flames licked the bulkheads, twisted metal groaning. The main vent controls, there. Gritting her teeth, she overrode the safeties, fingers blistering on the hot levers. Superheated coolant surged out in a deliberate flood, hissing into steam as it met the inferno, creating a blinding thermal haze that swallowed the ricochet's targeting locks. The bay filled with scalding fog, the spray hitting her like liquid fire, searing her arms and face. She collapsed against the console, skin bubbling, but the grid held. That segment, at least. Pain blurred her vision, but she'd bought them breathing room. Word spread fast through the command channels. Kale burst into the medbay an hour later, his face a mask of grim resolve as medics patched Rhea's burns with synth gel. "You saved the eastern line," he said, gripping her uninjured shoulder. "But this proves it. The restraints are choking his fire. We can't fight half measures anymore." Rhea winced as the gel cooled against her scorched arm, the medtech's hand steady but impersonal. The burn from the ruptured conduit still throbbed, a reminder of the shield grid's overload earlier that day. She pulled away, ignoring the tech's protest, and staggered to her feet in the dim command bunker. Alarms wailed faintly through the rock walls, a relentless pulse that matched the ache in her temples. Outside, the Sky Fleet's shadow loomed larger than ever. Through the narrow viewport, she watched Sarek's armada descend like a storm of iron and fire. The coalition ships, sleek predators with mirror-shielded hulls that refracted the mountain's jagged peaks into blinding illusions, dropped to low altitude, their engines roaring against the thin air. Bomb bays yawned open, unleashing salvos of guided incendiaries that arced toward the outer terraces. The blast slit the cliffs in staccato fury, shattering defensive emplacements and sending defenders tumbling into the void. Below, ground troops, armored figures swarming like ants, began their scaled assault, grapples firing under the cover of those mirrored flares. No more probing strikes. This was the endgame. Sarek meant to crack the city open before nightfall. Rhea's stomach twisted. She'd patched enough hulls to know the math. Their dwindling ammo couldn't hold that line. She turned from the viewport as Kale burst into the bunker, his face etched with the grim lines of a man who'd stared down too many sieges. His uniform hung loose on his frame, the weight of command eating him from the inside. "War Council now!" he barked, eyes locking on hers for a split second, long enough for the old spark to flicker, then die under the pressure. "Rhea, you're in. Overheart's our only play." She followed him without a word, the corridor's emergency lights casting long shadows. The council chamber was a stripped-down affair. No holograms, no aides, just a scarred table ringed by the remnants of leadership. Mara sat at one end, her fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the metal, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. A few captains flanked her, their faces smeared with soot and doubt. Kyle slammed the door shut, the boom echoing like a gavel. "Sarek's all in," Kale said, voice level but edged with steel. "Fleet's low enough to bomb us flat, troops breaching the terraces in waves. Shields are at 20%. We vote on Overheart, full activation. No half measures." Murmurs rippled. One captain, a wiry woman named Lyra, leaned forward. "That's suicide. The dragon's unstable, could take the city with it." "Or save it," Kale countered. "Narrow vote, aye or nay." Rhea's throat tightened. Overheart, the forbidden protocol buried in Mara's schematics. Channel every geothermal reserve into Vitharian's core. Wake him not as a battery but as a weapon. Victory or annihilation. She met Mara's gaze, saw the engineers flinch. The secret they'd shared in the depths now laid bare. The vote dragged, voices cracking under the weight. Lyra's nay hung heavy, but Kale's eye pulled the others. Narrow, bitter approval. "Do it," he said finally, turning to Rhea. "You're the one who knows him best. Make it count." She nodded, the motion mechanical, and slipped out before the arguments could snag her. The descent to the dragon chamber felt endless, the lift groaning under the mountain's strain. Her arm burned anew with every jolt, exhaustion pulling at her like gravity. Half burned, half broken, she leaned against the wall as the doors hissed open, the chamber's humid reek hitting her, sulfur and salt, the faint tang of ancient blood. Vitharian lay coiled in the gloom, a desiccated monument of scale and bone, his massive form dwarfing the geothermal rigs that had siphoned him for centuries. Chains thicker than her torso bound him to the rock, pulsing with faint runes. His eyes, dull amber slits, cracked open as she approached, the air shimmering with his labored breath. "Rhea Solace," his voice rumbled, a seismic whisper that vibrated her bones. "The sky darkens. Your foes come to claim what is mine." She knelt by the control dais, fingers trembling as she patched into the console. The Overheart sequence flickered to life on the screen. Raw power, no safeguards. "They're breaching the outer walls. Kale's ordered it. We flood you with the reserves, break the channels. You'll surge, fight them off. But it's a risk. You could consume everything." His head lifted slightly, scales cracking like dry earth. Thirst etched every line of him, a god reduced to a husk. "And my freedom? 800 years chained as your people's thirst quencher. You ask me to burn for you, yet keep me leashed?" Rhea's vision blurred, the exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Her brother's face flashed in her mind. Gone in the last siege, a casualty of necessary choices. How many more? But Vitharian's pain mirrored her own, a raw ache she'd ignored too long. "I can't promise freedom. The Council wants control, but if we don't..." "Choose," he snarled, the chamber trembling. "Your people or my chains. I will not be your tool again." The words broke something in her. She slammed her fist on the console, tears stinging the gel on her burns. Pragmatism had kept her alive, justified the pumps that drained him drop by drop. But this, weaponizing suffering. Her hands moved on instinct, pulling up Mara's hidden files. The failsafe, a web of neural locks buried in the dragon's heart core. Integrate it into Overheart, and he'd rise unbound, but tethered, his life to the cities. Freedom at the cost of their fates entwined. "I'm choosing," she whispered, voice cracking. "Both. Or neither." Alarms blared from the comms, breaches confirmed. Sarek's troops poured onto the terraces, las fire chewing through barricades. Ria's fingers flew, weaving the failsafe into the sequence. Treason, maybe. Alliance with a monster against her own. But the alternative was surrender, starvation, erasure. She hit execute as Kale's voice crackled over the link. "Shields down on my mark. Overheart now." The mountain groaned. Channel locks disengaged with a thunderous snap. Geothermal vents hissing open. Stored water, every precious reservoir hoarded against siege, flooded the chamber in a torrent, slamming into Vitharion like a biblical deluge. He convulsed, scales rippling as life surged back, veins glowing with primordial fury, chains shattered, links exploding outward in a hail of molten shards. Ria stumbled back, shielding her face as the rock ceiling fractured. Vitharion rose, a colossus uncoiling, wings unfurling with a gale that nearly bowled her over. His roar split the air, a sound of reborn wrath that shook the city to its roots. The mountain split wide, stone erupting in a cataclysmic plume as he burst upward, claws raking the cliffs. Through the widening fissure, Ria glimpsed the sky fleet, Sarek's central command ship directly overhead, its mirrors fracturing under the ascent. Dragonfire lanced out, a searing beam that vaporized the command ship's core. The vessel crumpled, exploding in a fireball that chained to nearby wings, entire squadrons dissolving into ash and twisted metal. Ground troops on the terraces scattered, grapples snapping as the cliffs sheared away in Vitharion's wake. He wheeled in the smoke-choked sky, majestic and terrible, a living eclipse blotting the invaders' advance. But as the echoes faded, Vitharion faltered mid-turn, his massive form twisting in evident shock. Ria felt it through the console's feedback, a jolt in the failsafe link. She'd wired him deep, his heart, still thundering with ancient power, now synced to the city's grid. Unchained from the mountain, yes, but depart, and the surge would feed back, dooming the pumps, the shields, the starving souls below. Freedom's illusion, survival's cruel bargain. He plummeted back toward the breach, eyes locking on her through the dust. Awe and rage warred in that gaze, a mirror to her own fractured soul. Kneeling amid ash and falling wreckage, Ria heard Kale's surviving officers brand her both savior and traitor, while Vitharion circled overhead, unbound yet unable to leave without killing her city. Ria knelt in the choking ash, her knees grinding into the shattered ferrocrete of the outer ramparts. The air reeked of scorched metal and ionized blood, the sky above fractured by the dying glow of coalition drop pods spiraling into the cliffs below. Vitharion's shadow swept over her, vast wings blotting the sun in rhythmic eclipses, his scales rasping like thunder against the wind. She could feel him in her veins now, a thrumming pulse that wasn't entirely her own, a bridge forged in desperation, linking her nerves to his ancient heart. Kale's voice cut through the haze, sharp as a blade. "No quarter, burn the stragglers. If even one gets a signal off about what we unleashed here, the coalition will glass this mountain from orbit." His officers, scarred remnants of the guard, nodded grimly, rifles snapping up as they fanned out toward the ragged lines of enemy survivors. The invaders, their flight suits torn and faces smeared with grime, were dropping weapons, hands raised in frantic pleas. "Surrender! We yield!" one shouted, his voice cracking over the comms. But Kale's men advanced without pause, las fire stitching the ground at their feet, herding them not toward mercy but the sheer drop. Horror coiled in Ria's gut, hot and familiar. like the first time she'd seen her brother's body pulled from a wrecked engine bay. This wasn't victory, it was erasure. She pushed to her feet, legs unsteady, the dragon's weight pressing on her mind like an unspoken command. "They beg," Vitharion rumbled through their link, his thoughts a gravelly echo laced with dry amusement. "As you once begged me." "No," she whispered, then louder, "Kyle, stop this." Her voice carried, amplified by the nexus still humming in her chest, a faint vibration from the modifications she'd jury-rigged in the depths. Heads turned, his officers, the invaders, even Vitharion's massive head swiveling mid-circle, golden eyes narrowing on her. Kale spun, his face a mask of controlled fury, the scar across his jaw twitching. "Rhea, stand down. This is containment. You think the coalition won't come harder if they know we fused with that?" He jerked his chin skyward where Vitharion banked low, claws skimming the wreckage. She ignored him, reaching inward through the link, her will threading into the dragons like oil into gears. "Shadow them," she urged, "not fire, just presence." Vitharion's response was a low, resonant growl that vibrated the air, sending pebbles skittering. He descended in a controlled dive, wings folding like storm sails, landing with earth-shaking force amid the survivors. His jaws parted slightly, revealing fangs longer than a man was tall, and a plume of superheated breath washed over the ground, wilting armor and blistering stone without touching flesh. The invaders froze, then collapsed in waves, weapons clattering forgotten. One man voided his suit, the acrid smell cutting through the ash. "Gods, it's alive! The dragons, alive!" They didn't run. There was nowhere to go under that gaze, ancient and unyielding, promising oblivion not through rage, but inevitability. Kale stormed toward her, gauntlet clamping her arm like a vice. "What the hell was that?" "You're undermining command." "Command!" Rhea yanked free, her skin crawling from the contact, the link flaring with Vitharion's disdain. "This is slaughter. They're broken, Kale. No signals, no fight left. Let them live, or what's the point of any of this?" His eyes hardened, the man she'd once known buried under layers of siege-hardened resolve. "The point is survival, ours." He signaled his officers. "Detain her, insurrection in the field." Rough hands seized her, cuffs biting into her wrists as they dragged her back toward the inner gates. Vitharion's mind brushed hers, a flicker of curiosity amid the thirst that never fully quenched. "Your mate turns predator. Will you chain him too?" She didn't answer, her focus narrowing to the pain in her arms, the distant screams cut short by last bolts. But as they hauled her into the geothermal chamber beneath the city, the heart of it all, where pipes snaked like veins from Vitharion's prison-turned power source, Kale followed, his boots echoing off the damp stone. The nexus loomed at the chamber's center, a lattice of crystal conduits and neural interfaces, pulsing with stolen draconic energy that kept the city's lights flickering, its pumps churning, its people breathing. Rhea had keyed it to herself in those frantic hours before the battle, weaving her implants into the core to stabilize the fusion. Now Kale approached it, gloved hand reaching for the primary node. "Step back," he ordered the guards holding her. "I'll take control. Prove it's still ours." His palm pressed the interface. Sparks erupted, blue arcs dancing across his fingers. He jerked back with a curse. The smell of singed leather filling the air. Alarms wailed softly, the lattice rejecting him like a foreign body. "What did you do?" His voice was low, dangerous, realization dawning. Rhea met his gaze, unflinching despite the cuffs. "It's mine now, or ours if you trusted me, but you don't. Not anymore." Vitharion's presence swelled in the chamber, his massive form coiled in the cavern beyond, scales scraping rock as he shifted. "Release," the dragon demanded, his voice booming through the link and into the air alike, shaking dust from the ceiling. "You swore it, little mechanic!" The pact was freedom for fire. She felt the truth of it then, sharper than any blade, a cascade of data flooding her mind from the nexus. Full severance would rupture the geothermal ties, the city's lifeblood. Pumps would fail, heat sinks overload breaks, thousands suffocating in the dark as the mountain choked on its own exhaust. The people she'd bled for, the ghosts of her brother included, would pay the price of his wings. "I know," she said aloud to both of them. Kale's eyes widened, but she turned inward, fingers flexing against the cuffs. With a thought, the lattice responded, unlocking the restraints in a hiss of hydraulics. Free, she approached the node, her hand steady where his had burned. "Rhea, don't," Kale started, but she was already interfacing, neural jacks unfolding from her palm like blooming metal flowers. Pain lanced through her, white-hot as she integrated deeper, tendrils of wire and synth flesh burrowing into her spine, linking her nerves to the heart lattice. Vytharian roared, a sound of agony and release, his body convulsing as power flowed freer, unhindered by the old bindings but tempered by her will. She gasped, vision blurring, the chamber tilting as her body became the bridge, her skin prickled with phantom scales, her breaths sinking to the dragon's labored heaves. It was irreversible. She felt the lattice rewrite her, grafting her essence into the machine god hybrid. No going back. The city would live. Vytharian could hunt the skies without dooming them all, but she was the governor now, forever caught between. Kale watched, face ashen, the ruthless captain cracking like old plating. "What have you done?" he whispered, not in anger, but something broken. He sank to one knee, staring at the glowing nexus, at her trembling form half merged with it. The war had forged this, his pushes for power, her desperate fixes, their shared scars twisting into this symbiosis. "I made you this, pushed too far." She couldn't speak, mouth dry as Vytharian's thirst, but her eyes conveyed it. "We both did." He rose slowly, removing his command insignia with deliberate care, letting it clatter to the floor. "I'm done leading. The council can have their politics." He glanced at the guards who averted their eyes uneasy. "I'll watch over you two, whatever this becomes, even if they call it a cage." Word spread through the vents and shafts, the council's condemnation echoing in hushed debates. Loss of control, a mechanic and a monster dictating terms. But Kale stood sentinel at the chamber doors, rifle slung, his vow a quiet bulwark against their decrees. Far beyond the shattered fleet, in the cold void where coalition relays hummed like dying stars, intercepted transmissions crackled to life. Sarek's final bursts, garbled screams of dragonfire and human defiance, painted fragments of truth, a city that had chained a god, then loosed it on a leash of flesh. Admirals in distant bridges leaned forward, star charts flickering as coordinates were scrubbed, paths rerouted. Whispers rippled through neutral ports and rival empires, a world where even the dying gods begged humans for water, and the humans drank from hearts of fire. Word of a city that drinks from a dragon's heart, while a human keeps its rage in check, began to ripple through the cosmos, and distant strategists concluded, in fearful consensus, that even the gods avoid humanity when it is thirsty enough to chain fire itself.